So in this video, we will be seeing about development of face, and the second part of the video, we will be seeing about the development of hard palate. So what should we know before going into the development of face? It begins at 4th week of intrauterine life from 5 primordia or 5 facial swellings. Okay, what are the 5 facial swellings? There is one frontonasal swelling, and there is 2 maxillary swelling and 2 mandibular swelling. So, one frontonasal swelling, 2 maxillary and 2 mandibular swelling. So, these 5 facial primordia or facial swellings are structures formed by mesenchyme. So, this mesenchyme is derived from neural crest cells. Okay, you just have to remember that these are structures formed by mesenchyme and it is covered by ectoderm. Okay, formed by mesenchyme and it is covered by ectoderm. And you can see a gap here. This region is called as the primitive mouth or stomadeum. Okay, this is called as primitive mouth or stomadeum. So regarding development of face, you should know what is the name of primitive mouth called as. It is called as stomadeum, and surrounding this primitive mouth there are 5 swellings, facial swellings. What is the content of these 5 facial swellings? It is made up of mesenchyme that is covered by the ectoderm. So these 5 swellings are named as frontonasal swelling, a pair of maxillary swelling and a pair of mandibular swelling. So these will develop into the future face. Regarding one more information regarding these swelling is that the frontonasal swelling is innervated by the first division of the trigeminal nerve, that is the ophthalmic division of trigeminal nerve. The maxillary swelling by the second division, that is the maxillary division of trigeminal nerve, and the mandibular swelling by the mandibular division of trigeminal nerve. And in the frontonasal swelling, you can see that in this region the ectoderm part thickens. Okay, that is called as the olfactory placode, and which will eventually form the olfactory pit. Okay, in the frontonasal region, the ectodermal thickening is called as olfactory placode. This will become the future nasal cavity or the nostrils. Okay, so this is about the olfactory placode. Next, we will see about. So I already told you it becomes the future nasal cavities. That is the fate of the olfactory placodes. The stomadeum, I told you, it becomes the future oral cavity or the lip opening, the oral fissure. That is the fate of the stomadeum. And then we'll see the fate of the following structures. Okay, first, only the mandibular swelling. It becomes the lower lip and lower part of the cheek. Okay, it becomes the future lower lip and the adjacent lower part of the cheek. All these areas are supplied by which cranial nerve? The mandibular division of the trigeminal nerve. Then we have the maxillary swelling as well as one component of the frontonasal process. Now, the important thing is, I told you the frontonasal process or the frontonasal swelling is a unpaired swelling. Okay, it gives 2 divisions called as the medial nasal process and lateral nasal process. Okay, the medial nasal process and lateral nasal process. The medial nasal process becomes the future primitive nasal septum in the midline. It becomes the primitive nasal septum. The lateral nasal process will join together with the maxillary process to form the lateral part of the upper lip as well as the upper part of the cheek. So the entire lower lip and the lower part of the cheek is formed by the mandibular swelling. Only the lateral part of the upper lip and the upper part of the cheek is formed by the maxillary swelling as well as lateral process of the frontonasal process. In addition to this, we've left out only the middle part of the upper lip. That is called as the philtrum of the upper lip. You can see this is the lip. Okay, so this middle part is called as the philtrum of the upper lip. This region, the philtrum region alone, is formed by a globular process of medial nasal process. Okay, philtrum or the median part of the upper lip is formed by the globular process part of the medial nasal process. So the outline is that you should know that there are 5 swellings: frontonasal process, maxillary and mandibular. In the frontonasal process, you have to remember that there is the olfactory placoid that becomes the future nasal cavity. Based on the position of this olfactory placoid, there are 2 processes in the frontonasal process. 2 parts are called as medial nasal process and lateral nasal process. What is the fate of this medial nasal process? It becomes the primitive nasal septum, and it has one globular part that becomes the philtrum of the upper lip. The lateral nasal process will join together with the process on the side, that is the maxillary process. The joining part between the lateral nasal process and the maxillary process, that junction, if it does not fuse properly, then it will lead to a defect called as oblique nasal defect or the oblique facial cleft. Okay, if the lateral nasal process does not fuse with the maxillary process, it is called as oblique facial cleft. And then we have the mandibular process that forms the lower lip as well as the lower part of the cheek. There is one more defect here called as the cleft lip. Okay, if the both the side front maxillary process does not meet the globular process. Okay, the globular process forms the middle part of the upper lip. If these two does not meet there, then it will lead to cleft in this region. It can be on one side or it can be bilateral. That is called as the cleft lip. We already saw about oblique facial cleft. The other terminology, clinical anatomy, is called as microstomia. This region is formed by the maxillary process, and this is from the mandibular process. If there is too much of fusion, then the oral fissure is small. Okay, that is called as microstomia. So this is about the development of face. In the next half of the video, we will see about the development of palate. So what is palate? Palate is the separating structure that separates the nasal cavity from the oral cavity. And this palate consists of a hard palate that has been ossified, and the posterior aspect of it is membranous or muscular and fibrous in structure, that is called as the soft palate. You can see when the mouth is wide open, a small tongue-shaped structure in the back, that is called as the uvula. This is also part of the soft palate. Regarding the development of palate, the palate is formed in 2 stages. The first one is called as the primary palate. It is formed by the fusion of medial nasal process. Okay, we already saw what is it a component of. The medial nasal process is a component of frontonasal process. By the fusion of both the side medial nasal process, the primary palate is formed. It will give anchor attachment to the upper 4 incisor teeth. Okay, upper 4 incisor teeth. And this forms the future premaxilla. It gets ossified to form the premaxilla. And then we have the secondary palate. Okay, this is formed by the fusion of palatine shells of maxillary process. I'll say again, this structure labeled as 1 here is called as the primary palate that forms the premaxilla. And this structure labeled as 2 on either side, this is called as the palatine shells of maxillary process. So let's assume this region to be the maxillary process. Okay, the projection towards the midline is called, this part is called as the palatine shelf of the maxillary process. They have to come from either side and meet at the midline. So that's how the secondary palate is formed. In this also you have to know the secondary palate is this entire part is called as the secondary palate. Okay, in that only part of it will ossify or become bony. So which is the part that ossifies? The part that meets the nasal septum. Okay, only the part that meets the nasal septum in the midline, that will become hard and bony to ossify and form the hard palate. Okay, so how is the hard palate formed? It is formed from premaxilla that has formed from the medial nasal process of the frontonasal process, as well as the ossified part of the palatine shelves of the maxillary process. And the soft palate is formed from the posterior 1/4, the unossified part of the palatine process or the palatine shelves of the maxillary process. Here, this region, this conical region is called as uvula. Okay, this uvula, if it does not fuse on both the sides, okay, it will look somewhat like this. That is called as bifid uvula. And if the fusion does not happen at all, if both the side palatine shelves does not meet, then that is called as cleft palate. We already saw cleft lip in relation with the development of face. It can occur together. Cleft lip as well as cleft palate can occur together. What do you think is the common symptom that can occur in people with cleft palate? Whatever food or liquid, a newborn baby, whenever it takes in liquid, it will enter into the nasal cavity. Okay, so that is about the cleft palate. This also can be on one side or it can be on the midline. So this is about development of face and the development of palate.